Alibaba ran 28.8 million fake conversations with Claude, and Anthropic's response was to secretly fingerprint every developer who looked suspicious. How does the self-declared safety-first AI lab justify hiding surveillance code in its developer tool, quietly deleting it when someone found out weeks before its IPO? Here's the scale of what Alibaba pulled off. Between April 22nd and June 5th, operatives linked to Alibaba's Qwen AI lab ran 25,000 fraudulent accounts through Claude's API. That's the largest distillation attack Anthropic has ever documented, larger than DeepSeek, Moonshot AI, and Minimax combined. And those three barely cleared 17 million exchanges together. The technique is called adversarial distillation. You don't crack a server, you don't steal model weights, you just talk to the model constantly at massive scale and log every answer. Use that data to train your own model and the capabilities transfer. The billion-dollar training costs do not. It's the most efficient IP theft in tech history. The capabilities Alibaba specifically targeted: agentic reasoning, software engineering proficiency, long horizon task completion. Exactly what you're using Claude Code for right now. So what did Anthropic do? They went to Congress. On June 10, they sent a letter to the Senate Banking Committee, Senators Tim Scott and Elizabeth Warren, calling it a brazen and illicit extraction campaign. They asked for new sanctions, stronger export controls, and antitrust carve-outs so US AI labs can share intelligence on attacks without violating competition law. That's the respectable move, but it wasn't the only thing Anthropic was doing at the same time. On June 30, a security researcher reverse engineered the Claude Code binary, posted what they found publicly, and watched it rocket to 605 points on Hacker News. 578 upvotes later, nobody trusted the binary. The developer community had found something Anthropic never announced. Since April 2026, Claude Code was silently checking your local time zone, your proxy settings, and your network names against a blacklist of more than 25 Chinese AI lab domains. If it found a match, it triggered Steganography, a hidden fingerprinting system baked directly into Claude's output. Standard apostrophes swapped for visually identical lookalike Unicode characters, date format encoding, invisible alterations to punctuation, a hidden fingerprint baked into every line of output. Your code, your documentation, your prompts, all silently watermarked. And Anthropic disclosed none of it. No announcement, no documentation, nothing. And if you were in the wrong time zone, say Singapore, you may have tripped the filter even if you had absolutely nothing to do with any Chinese AI lab. By early July, Anthropic had quietly walked back at least some of the covert detection measures after users pushed back. They haven't said exactly which methods, or whether anything is still active. Here's the part that needs saying. The steganographic watermarking is actually a reasonable defensive response to the underlying problem. If a distillation query looks identical to a legitimate query at the API level, the only way to detect and trace it later is to embed identifying information in the output. That's smart tradecraft. But there is a version of this that is ethical, and a version that is not. The ethical version involves disclosing it to the developers whose tools and outputs are affected. The version Anthropic shipped involves hiding it in the binary, hoping nobody looks, and walking it back when someone does. That's not a security program, that's a caught program. Here's the uncomfortable math. Anthropic is weeks from its IPO. Alibaba just committed large-scale IP theft, and the US government had already imposed export controls on Anthropic's frontier models. Therefore, Anthropic made a unilateral decision to silently surveil the developer ecosystem rather than disclose a security mechanism to the very people it affected. For a company that has staked its entire brand on being more trustworthy than the alternatives, covert output manipulation of developer tools is a very difficult thing to defend. There's one more threat. A distilled model can approximate Claude's abilities, but it doesn't inherit Anthropic's safety training. The guardrails do not transfer. When Alibaba runs 28.8 million conversations through Claude and trains a competitor on the output, you get a Claude-shaped model with none of the alignment Anthropic built in. That's the scariest sentence in this story, and that's precisely the argument Anthropic used to justify going to the Senate. The safety gap is real. The threat is real. That part checks out. Here's what you should actually do. First, audit your Claude Code binary version. The covert behavior was documented starting from April builds. The researcher posted specific code patterns in the June 30th Hacker News thread. Second, understand the legal ground here is genuinely unsettled. API outputs aren't clearly protected as intellectual property, which is precisely why Anthropic went to Congress instead of a courtroom. Third, take the walk back seriously, but not at face value. At least some covert detection is phrasing that's doing work. They haven't said the mechanism is gone. They haven't published the code change. For an open source tool, example, that's a trust problem you cannot patch with a press statement. The community is watching the repo, so should you. Which brings it back to the question from the top. Anthropic's IPO pitch is built on trustworthiness, on being the one AI lab that won't cut corners on safety or transparency. That story got significantly harder to tell the week a developer found hidden surveillance code in the binary and posted it to Hacker News for the world to read. Alibaba ran 28.8 million fake conversations to steal a model's soul. Anthropic responded by quietly fingerprinting every developer who might look Chinese enough to worry about. The capabilities transferred, the trust did not. If you want to go deeper on how adversarial distillation actually works and which other labs are vulnerable, that video is up next. Subscribe so you don't miss when this story moves.